I started out, that doesn't look right. I started out with some things that I was working on right after college. So I started with like just a basic idea of this is what I did right after college. The next few, you can just go forward for a couple of them.
Okay.
It was more sculptural, it was not functional. So that's where I started at, when I started having my own studio and selling my own work. This was the first piece that I ever carved. I'd like to show you where it started so that you can see the progression, because things don't start good. Things get good with a lot of practice. And this was the very first thing I carved. I went to carving. I had been doing these brightly colored work, and I was airbrushing mason stains in terra sigillata. And when I wanted to get pregnant and have a child, I didn't want those toxins in my studio anymore. And I thought, what can I do with white? Just no color at all. So I went to carving with a clear glaze because I thought it would be a healthier solution for those years. And it just turned out that I never left it yet. My son is now 16, so that's the context. Now, if you look at this design, it's just sort of random blah. It has no relationship with the form. The form is kind of useless. The form is not very exciting. But that's where it starts. So if you could go to the... And you're just going to see a progression. This was trying to create a sense of flow and a sense of movement around the form, but not really. It could have been any form. It wasn't really working with that form. Go ahead. And this was beginning to start to be a little more conscious of the form and of starting to use symmetry. I was reading a lot about the Mata Ortiz potters in central Mexico and studying what they did with grids on pots, and then trying to make a grid on the pot so that I could just make a very simple but very symmetric design on the pot. Because the previous pots that you saw, and a lot of my beginning pots, I would start at one side of the pot and then carve around it, and by the time I got to the other side, it was a mess, because they weren't coming together well. And I realized that symmetry would solve that problem. So I had a lot of great pots that looked great in a slide, but if you turned it around, it was just a disaster. So this is just the very simplest, very basic beginning. The lines following the form, the lines more enhancing the form. You can go next. And then seeing what happens when you take that simple design and put it onto a more elongated form. And a lot of what I do is taking one design and trying it on 10 different forms and seeing what works and what doesn't. This, on a rounder form, it enhanced the roundness in the curve, and it made it more round. And on here, it's giving more of a sense of a downward droop and a pull downward, enhancing that shape. And so then I just thought, well, now that I'm getting it, I can go more complicated. Until, you can go again, it just got more complicated. And then the next one. And then I decided, well, it's great, it's a good challenge, but I needed a few more elements, design elements involved, and started trying to create, what's these? So I was trying to develop more of different elements within the design, but creating the same sense of symmetry and movement. And again, it's that downward sort of pull that I was interested in. I'm often interested in motion, creating motion, while enhancing whatever form I'm doing. You can go ahead. So this is getting a little better. So having the descending diamonds going down along with the drooping leaves and hugging the form, the lines hugging the form and enhancing the curves. And I don't think this one's quite as successful because, I don't know, the shape's just not as nice. So just playing with that same exact design on all different forms and seeing how the change in width, the change in narrowness will then affect it. Go ahead. And then getting more complicated and finding more of a balance between the scale of the design and the scale of the pot. Is that clear? Okay, go ahead. Now, this is just a further example of the same idea. It's the same basic pattern, it's just repeating it over and over instead of having two different patterns going. The other thing that I like to do is I like to play with scale and miniatures that will look monumental. So this was, you know the Orton Cone Box show? This was 2 inches tall. And that's what I like to do. I like when you put it in a photo, it doesn't look like what it is. You can go. And so this is another idea of this drooping. These were mostly inspired by the Tiffany stained glass windows with the wisteria and those big drooping blossoms. And it's just, so it's the same basic idea as the very, first pot in the series. It's just getting a little better. And the scale is working better. And then again, trying it on a whole different shape and letting it start big at the top of the bowl and go smaller and smaller and smaller, again, reinforcing the form of the pot. Okay. And this is just another example of where at the top, the pattern is slightly smaller because it's narrower, and then having the pattern grow with the shape of the pot and then narrow with the shape of the pot. And just, again, enhancing that shape and working with it instead of working against it. Okay. And then, what happens if you take the exact same thing and flatten it down onto a tile? And then that's working with a whole other idea of symmetry and pattern. And then that's the exact same thing, just put on a plate. I have very few ideas. I work every idea to death. And it just goes endlessly. Anybody else would be bored to tears, but I just keep going. Okay, you can go next. And then, so this is another version of the same thing. It's the same petals at the top and the diamonds, but then I wanted to see what happens if I just had straight, verticals pulling downward and sort of hugging the form. How would that then affect it?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Is that the break in the glaze, was that just natural, or did you?
Yes, it's a fake celadon. So yeah, I only work with a few glazes, and I look for those that break and enhance the carving. Go ahead. And that's, again, the same thing, different shape. Go ahead. Okay, here's my other idea. The only other idea I have is spirals. I love spirals. And again, this is a thing of at the widest point of the curve, the spiral is slowing your eye down and making you stick there for a minute. And then those lines coming down along the bottom of the pot are then speeding your eye down the line of the pot. A lot of times when I'm playing with composition, I'm trying to create movement along the pot and different speeds that your eye follows that movement. So just at the widening, slowing you down, and at the narrowing, speeding you up. And it enhances the form and makes it more dramatic to me. You can go ahead. This is the same design, but on something very low and flat, just to see, as the previous. I don't know why it's out of order. But go ahead with the next one. Oh, yeah. So you see, that's the beginning. So you see the progression and how, 15 years ago, it was a little idea, it wasn't really working, I didn't know what I was doing. And I look at all of my work as it's almost like learning to read, where in the beginning you're looking at every single letter and trying to identify it. And then with time, it's like when you learn to throw too, if you guys are throwers. Over time, suddenly you've got 3-letter words, then you've got paragraphs, then you've got pages, and you don't even notice the individual letters anymore. And this was like when I was learning my alphabet. I feel like every little line was a struggle. I also think for me, not for everybody, it takes 15 years to get a mature body of work. I can't do it in any less. So this is another one from the Orton Cone Box show. It's again 2.5 inches tall. And if you look over there later, there's a very similar pot with what are to me huge improvements, but to a lot of people might not notice it, and I'll point it out later. Go ahead. So it's again these spirals, and taking the spiral and putting the center of the spiral sort of at the widest point of the curve, and then those lines moving around are moving your eye around and speeding you up as you go outward on that curve. Go ahead. Now, this is one that didn't work. The pattern has absolutely no real relationship with the form. If you look at the spirals, in most situations you can't even see them when you place that on a shelf or on a table. So this is just a good example of how not to go about designing around a form. And this is a little better. You can see it's working more with the form. It's considering how you see it, where you see it. And again, this is a very simple sort of downward movement again with the slowest area at the widest point of the curve. And then sort of, what do you call that? A sequence of lines drawing your eyes down and speeding you up. Go ahead. This is just another way of playing with the same idea and placing the spirals thingy sort of toward the top on that form so it was more visible. Go ahead. And go ahead. And then here's another way of making something wrap around a form. Now the form is not that complicated, and the movement is going to be all with those spirally lines. It's not up and down a form, it's just moving around a form really quickly. Go ahead. This is the same thing. You can see I can work an idea to death, I really can. And this is a pot that I think I made a while ago, and this week I just got a commission for a funeral urn, so it's that with a lid. And so it's just funny because I keep going back to the same stuff. Go ahead. And then these are all the same, it's exactly the same pattern as the last pot, but everything has been shifted downward because the weight of the curve is shifted downward. And then these lines that are going up into the neck are going very quickly as you come up the side of there. It's just playing with the same idea and seeing what pot it will work on. Go ahead. And then this is an idea of saying, well, how do I break my rules now? Can I shift the balance? Can I shift everything over and still make it work? Go ahead. And yet another of the same ideas. This was a broken bud vase. It came up to a vase shape. I broke it and I thought, well, okay, what are we going to do now? Go ahead. And I have a further progression of that over there. And that's what it's turned into lately, where I've actually planned for a turn at the top and then cut it off. Go ahead. And then I do a lot of tile work these days, and going through putting patterns together in a way and repeating things is just fun. Go ahead. And that's another idea that I've been working on for a long time. It's sort of a storm. It's a storm or at sea. Go ahead. And it's very abstracted. A lot of these are very abstracted emotions in a way. And this is the same thing on a different form. It's exactly the same pattern, different form. And these all have two-sided symmetry. If you turn that pot around, it's exactly the same on the other side. And getting all the symmetry to come together is what's kind of hard. Go ahead. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of tile work and custom tile work for people's homes. This was a man in Minnesota. It's a Hindu meditation symbol. So I'm just going to show you quickly the progress of how it went. This is just the cut pieces. Go ahead. And then sanding each piece with a grout line, sanding the grout line into each piece so that it all lines up perfectly. Go ahead. And then starting to carve it. Go ahead. Getting more of the carving. And that's it in his house, which you can't see. So it was one of my first sort of mural projects, working with someone else's pattern and idea and just seeing what I could do with it. So you can go ahead. And this is a fireplace that I did in Walnut Creek. Each of those little pieces, if you see my necklace when you turn the lights on, it's one of the pieces from that I made into a necklace. Go ahead. That's a close-up of it. Okay, go ahead. And this is one that I actually just sold this week. It's going to a kitchen in Illinois. It's fun to sort of play with. That's one glaze there. I'm having fun playing the thicker. When you have celadon-like glazes, the thicker it is, the darker it is. So taking a single glaze and making sort of a monochromatic design with it has been interesting me lately. Go ahead. And this one I think is just too busy. I like it, but it's too busy. It's like anything I do. The first pass is not great, and I learn what I regret. And then I will go back and I will make this 40 more times until I actually kind of like it. I mean, I like it, I'm just not. Okay, so then we're back to the beginning. So you can see how over 16 years, it's just, it changes. Okay, is that everything? Yeah, okay. For lights. Okay. I have up here, I don't know if everybody got it, it talks about the dust mask that I use, it talks about tools that I use, pass them around, just because these are the questions people usually ask after we're done, so I thought I would just make it easier. The tools, oh, and also, I'm teaching 2 workshops at my house and 1 at Cal. They're here. There's a mailing list here. If you want to be on my workshop mailing list or my show mailing list, just leave me an email address. And there was a pen here that I borrowed from someone that is now gone. So if you accidentally took somebody's pen, I don't know whose it was, bring it back. Okay. So these are the tools that I use mostly. This is a dental tool that my dentist, his office manager, orders them for me. And this is just a Dolan tool. I have a sharpening stone here. I sharpen them and I use them to death, but I've also found now that I use bison tools, which are made, are y'all familiar with bison? Mm-hmm. He's great. He's hard to nail down, but he's wonderful. And I just did that because I used to go through a Dolan tool a week. And with Phil's tools, I had one for a year and I just sent it back for resharpening. So instead of $8 a week, it's $55 a year, and he'll resharpen them. They last forever, they're wonderful, they feel great in your hand. So his contact info is on there as well. And also just, I carve bone dry, and that's not good for you. But I spent a lot of time speaking with people at OSHA about how to minimize the risks, and so the mask and the filters that I use are on there, and Bailey Pottery just has a wonderful page talking about what you need to know if you're going to do this. If you're going to do this once, don't worry about it. If you're going to do this a lot, protect yourself. So this is the mask. It's lovely. I wear it pretty much 8 hours a day in my studio. I answer the phone with it. It's like I would eat my lunch with it. I forget it's there. It's not a big deal. People say, oh, it's awful. That's okay.
Where do you buy the mask?
That's on here, labsafety.com, and their phone number and email are, I think that, yeah, their phone number and email are on here. So, I brought a few things of other people's carving. You're probably familiar with like Elaine Coleman and Cliff Lee, so you all know about them. And then there are a lot of very wonderful Native American people doing some really interesting stuff. What I feel it's important to emphasize is I do really complicated things, but not everybody likes that. So the best thing to do when you're in a workshop or learning a new skill is adapt it to your patient's level. Because I understand that not everybody wants to do this, but if you do something much simpler, it can be a very nice tool, it's a nice little trick to have up your sleeve. And there are all different kinds of, here's piercings. These are done with a Dremel tool mostly. And then, and I think these are done at Bisque. So I don't know how much to go through all of that, but you can all look at this stuff later. This is Natalie Blay. Again, I like symmetry. I need the control. I'm a control girl. She is not. We've met. We've had great times together. She is not a control girl. Everything is loose and out of control with her, but it works. It works for her. It works for her personality. And then, what's her name again? Jennifer McCurdy. She's good at what she does. She's really good. So these are just some articles. And also in talking about symmetry and the Mata Ortiz, I wrote a book of them. I don't know how many of you have actually seen them. But they all, I realized after looking, everything's a grid. It's just a grid with different squares painted in. They just took it to another level. So I love them. I have a lot of respect for them.
Do they actually grid it off?
I believe they do.
Because I was was there and I never saw anybody.
They didn't do it?
They all did it freehand.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Well, they told. Looking at that, wait, even this, they didn't draw that out first, they
I
just
never
did it?
saw it drawn out. I talked to them about it, and they said, and we kept saying, how could you go all the way
Right.
around and have it come out even?
Right.
They do, I don't know how.
Well, for some reason, I thought they gridded it, and that's why I started my grids. So I had a totally wrong idea.
Well, unless
They start there and then they just do it so many times.
Maybe.
They just know how to do it.
But I mean, looking at this, that's what gave me the idea, wow, I can do that. So, that's crazy. And I'm always amazed in this book of like, what are they doing and how do they do it? But they taught me something without needing to, I guess. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through this a little bit. And again, this is bone dry. I do it at bone dry because I like really crisp, clean designs. And I find it leather hard, it gets mushy. And the tool will jump along compression lines from the throwing. So I had a really hard time getting the sharpness that I wanted on leather hard. Can you guys see? Can you see that? Yeah, you know, move wherever you need to be.
Bring your chair over.
Okay, so when I'm at home, I have a HEPA vacuum cleaner that I sit with all day, and all day I'm just sopping up the dust that I'm making. The other thing that I found out is that if you dampen the clay, the particle size stays larger. It's larger than what will lodge in your lungs. So I'm constantly dampening the surface as I go. So I dampen and vacuum, dampen and vacuum. I'm using a Ziploc bag just to rest the pot on because I need something. Usually at home I have a pillow wrapped in a garbage bag and taped up. But for learning, for this, it's just as well to do this. And you can control the fullness of it so that it rests easily. Now this is the part where I think you're going to have a little bit of trouble seeing. So, where's the string? In drawing the grid, now this is something that I think is really, really useful if you're painting, anytime you want to make a symmetric design or map something out. I forgot my pen tool. That's okay, we'll wing it. Okay, so this grid is already on here, but the easiest way to do this, and I know there are all these contraptions you can get to do this with, but I found that when I'm sitting down and mapping out a pot, sometimes I want 8 sections, sometimes I want 16, sometimes I want 25, odd numbers, even numbers. As I'm going, I figure out what proportion I want. So it's good for me to be able to just go boom, 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 and get it done. And to change my mind, because I often get it wrong on the first go. So I'm just going to start at the middle of this petal. I've done a lot of demonstrations lately. You just take your string, place it there, and mark it. So I'm going to mark right where the string starts. I'm going to wrap this around here, and this is a very, very simple idea. And my string is not big enough. There, okay. And then come to where your mark is. I need a bigger piece of string, but we'll just wing this. That's longer. And I feel like I should dip my ends in nail polish because it's always fraying, so I'm just dipping it in water. Okay, so wrap it around. Come back to your beginning, take your piece of string, fold it in half. If you want an even number of segments. And then just fold it in half, grab it at the fold, put it back where you started, and come around. Now I find it's easier, I will always put it on the wheel and draw a round line so I have something to stay with so I'm not going up and down. And always double check, because it's very easy to get it wrong and then you figure out later that it's not right. So just coming around and getting it back to the beginning. So that's in half. Do the same thing. Cut it in half again for quarters. eighths, sixteenths. For odd numbers, I just wrap it around, take a measurement, and get my ruler out and divide by 5, divide by 7. It usually works okay. But I usually do have to do it a couple of different proportions before I figure out exactly what it is I want for that particular pot. I'm missing my pin tool. That's okay. So, actually I can use the pen. Pen is good too. So on this, it's just going to be a pattern like this one here with the petals on the top, diamonds underneath, and stripes going down. So what I would do is I would map out the whole thing and then do my horizontal lines, mostly on the wheel. If you're not a thrower, just brace yourself, brace your elbow against you, turn the wheel, you stay still, you get a line. So in doing this, what I will do is I'll map out every other petal and just draw that in first. It's hard to do upside down, but we'll try. And actually a pen's a good idea because you guys can probably see that better. So there's one already here a little bit.
Is that a pen?
It's a pen.
It's a pen.
To make a scratch?
Yeah, I usually use a needle, but I forgot my needle. So every other one, and what I do is I use the grid a lot. I'm going to divide this in half. I know I want the point to come to this line. Now this is the widest point of my curve, so I'm just keeping an eye on that because it's always important to me. I'm going to come over here and make the same exact heart shape. And I'm always just looking at the negative shapes that I'm making and making sure that I'm consistent. Then I'm going to come back in between and draw exactly the same shape, but I'm going to erase the overlapping lines. And this might be really obvious, I don't know, but this is what I do. Okay, so I'm going to do the middle design. It's just an eye, sort of an almond shape overlapping here. And again, I know that the bottom of that point is going to come to the same spot here, and I can just extend this line over and do the same thing.
How long does it take you to do a single pot?
Ridiculously long time. But I will, the simplest one, something like this, is probably 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours of carving, not throwing.
Yeah.
This was 2 or 3 days. This is fairly simple, so that even though it's large, it only took maybe a day. This will be 7 or 8 hours. So they're slow.
Yeah.
They're not fast. I think the most I've ever done on a pot is like 6 days, and that was. And you just love it the last minute when you poke a hole in it. That's my favorite. Okay. What? It's really, really, really thick. Can I pass something around? Okay. So if you hold something like this, if you stick your fingers in, this is the widest point. This is where it starts. So just don't get a hernia. They're really heavy. They're very heavy. You know, I'm shocked lately that my pots are getting lighter and lighter. But some of them like that, you have to throw it really thick. I think like this thick. Otherwise, you can't get that dimensionality that I want. Okay.
And is it porcelain?
It's a Chrome 6 porcelain. I didn't put it down on the thing because I have it shipped to me from Pennsylvania, which I don't think anybody else really wants to do because it's really expensive. But when I'm going from, you know, really thick to paper thin very quickly, I haven't found another body that will do that for me. So if you're doing shallower carving, which is what a lot of people do, most porcelains will work. But for what I'm doing, because I'm going so deep, I stick with what I know works. And I'm always trying new clays, but I haven't found anything yet. All right, so I've got these 3 petals drawn out here. I'm just going to dampen the clay. Oh, I forgot my glasses. Last time I did a demo, I forgot my glasses. Okay. So using this dental tool, this is an American Eagle T3 carver. It's lovely. I'm just going to take the point of the tool and incise a line. I'm going to make a little bit of a mess. I hope it's not too much of a problem. And I don't have my vacuum here.
Don't worry.
Okay.
It's a barber business.
What?
Kiss plane.
Oh, okay.
They do all sorts of barber.
All right. So I'm just going to dampen it again and keep going and incise. The first step is just incising some lines that are there. And I would generally go through and do every other one because one leaf is going to be above the other leaf. One's going to be going under, one's going to be going over. So I'll do the over leaves first. And here I continue the line all the way down. And I'm also looking at the negative spaces and just keeping that symmetry going. And I think I've estimated that in general, when I'm being careful in my studio, each of these petals is about 20 minutes. So that's a good way of judging. So I've got, maybe if you want to come up and look more closely, please feel free. It won't disturb me. So once I go back, there's a lot of chipping. So I'm going to wet it again and smooth out the lines. I'm going to use the side of the tool. I know it's hard to see, and I'm really sorry. I'm going to use the side of the tool and run it against the plane that's coming upward. And then taking the side of the tool and holding the tool almost parallel, I'm going to cut away a wedge of the clay.
We're going to come and watch up close, and if somebody else doesn't come, we're going to be really embarrassed. She won't, but I will.
Leave the space there so that people can take closer.
Yeah, I feel badly doing these demos because they're slow and they're
You
boring.
really can't see something from here.
Yeah. So I've just taken away a wedge of clay by holding the tool parallel to the clay. And then coming back with the Dolan tool, I'm going to feather back that angle there's been an angle created here. But because I want the illusion that it's growing out of the pot, I'm just going to take that away and smooth it out so it looks like it's just a smooth plane. I use this a lot in coming along here and just smoothing it. Also, you need to get rid of the grid because your tool jumps along the little grid lines. So before I get going too far, I'll just erase the indented lines there that will get in my way.
Then it's from the hardware store, Sandy's stuff.
Yeah, just from any old hardware store should have it. I also use, for finer stuff, this is like brute force. This is really big and scratchy. And then when I need finer stuff, I'll use a kitchen scrubby. I don't have a better word for them.
Have you discovered the sand, for lack of a better term, the sandy mesh that they use for drywall?
I've seen it. Does it
That's
work?
really violent.
I don't know if it is. I have when my hardwood floors were refinished, the guy gave it to me, so it's already a little bit worn, and it doesn't get stopped up like, it doesn't get stopped up. Not for me.
Okay, because it goes right through.
Yeah, and you can just tap out the stuff and
You can get it in different
grits.
grits.
Okay. I just use my vacuum cleaner to suck everything out of there. I guess you could wrap it around a sponge. So I need something I can hang on to. Like that's just a piece of paper.
That might be a way to do it.
I think it would wrap it around a sponge, and that might really be nice. But then the sponge is behind it. Okay. So you can see how this is coming down here, and I'll go over it a bunch of times. Once is never quite enough for me. And then coming through and just feathering it back until it's a smooth surface. And then, so that, you can see that this is now coming out of the clay, and this one here is going to be under it. So what I'll do is, I'll now come back and make this flower here, so you can see how it will go under the one that I just made. So I'm going to go back to the lines that I drew, incising it first with the point of the tool, and then going back with the side of the tool along the edge that's rising up. If I say anything that isn't clear, stop me and tell me, because working and talking at the same time, I can forget to add things. Okay, so I'm getting rid of the grid lines.
So what are you using? What is that pen?
This is just from, it's like a spongy type thing with sandpaper around it, and it's just from the hardware store. I get them at the Home Depot. Everybody's got them, even my little local place down the road. So I'm going to then go here. And you see that since this is down, this already looks like it's a little bit underneath it, going underneath it. So I don't have to do a whole lot to create that illusion. So then I can just come back on this side and again holding it, I'm sorry, clay is flying everywhere. Holding it parallel to the pot surface. I'm going to go back and reinforce it again and make sure the curves are nice. For me, curve is really important, and a really flowing, beautiful, perfect curve is essential. Anything less than just interrupts your eye as it's going down the side of the piece. So I do pay a lot of attention to just the flow of a curved line. Okay.
Do you sketch your designs on paper on the forms you know you like to throw?
I have never been able to do that. I can, for tiles, I do. For tiles, I draw it out, but it's too hard for me to translate how something's really going to flow over a form. Somebody can do that, but it's not me. I have to actually see it on the pot in order to know if it's working or if it's going to work. And there's this awful perfectionist streak where by the time I'm done with the pot, I don't like it anymore. And I'm sure you're all like, a lot of you are like that. It's like, no, that now I know where I want it to go. And that's why I always keep maybe 50 forms on the shelf, so that when I finish this and I say, oh, that was a stupid idea, but it would look better on this shape, or what would happen on this shape, I just have something I can grab. And I almost always have something that I think is going to work better. But it's this constant progression of, oh, let's try that. No, I can do better than that. Let's try that. Oh, that's a little better, but I can do better. And so that's how I can do one design for 16 years and just keep evolving slowly. No, they're not the same. They're all different. It's just some people are very intuitive in design, and they go, boom, and it's there. I have to do it 20 times before I know if it's okay. And like I said, by the time I'm done with it, yeah, I don't like it anymore.
Do you always glaze your ware?
Yes.
Why?
Because I don't like the feel of the fired raw clay. I don't want it. I want the touchability. I want the attraction of like people want to run their hands over it. And as soon as I touch fired clay that doesn't have a glaze, unless it's maybe burnished porcelain, my instinct is like, I don't want to touch that. I just don't want to touch it. So I do, and most of my stuff has at least an implied function. It's for flowers, it's for food. So I like to have it durable, and it's going to go through the dishwasher, it's going to go through the microwave, and it's not going to stain, it's not going to look worn, it's going to stay. So that's that. That's the basic carving technique. And so this petal is going to go under this petal, so it's again just cutting away that wedge and giving the impression that it's going under, when in fact it's just a little lower. And feathering it back with the tool, and then making the whole thing one sort of plane. So that on pots where, it's leaf under leaf under leaf under leaf, it's not actually getting thinner that way. It's still staying at its original thickness at each leaf. It's just getting thinner at, where is that? At, say, this gets thinner. But then I'll just do stripes underneath. So on the top of the stripes, it's always the original thickness.
Can I feel?
Yeah, please, go ahead. It's very thick.
I don't think it's as thick as you implied.
Really?
Maybe like that, do you think?
About half an inch.
About a half an inch.
This, yeah, I think the one that got passed around is, that's my thickest. That's like, that's the mother of all thickness pots.
Traveling pot.
Yeah, it's a weapon. So, the other thing that I do is, when I finally finish a pot, sorry, I can't see with these on. I take it outside with one of those wide, soft Chinese brushes, and I stand against the wind, and I brush the whole thing off, and then I go over it with just water several times, because it's an extra polishing process, where if there are sharp edges, you just wash it, wash it, wash it, wash it. You don't want to get so much water that it's dripping down, but you just want to get everything softened and cleaned, and sometimes that makes all the difference in the world. But usually I will do that in the morning. If I finish a pot any time of day, I wait till the next morning to do that, because if I do it at night, I'm too tired, and I get lazy about it. And I want to be fresh and thinking, and I often take it outside into sunlight, because I think that's the best way to actually see it. So that's about the process. And then I'm fire to cone 6. I use commercial glazes, and they're all cone 6 oxidation, but I'm really fussy about what ones I will use, because to me they have to do something good. If they're not adding anything to the pot, I'll go with clear. Until my son was, until 3 years ago, I only used clear glaze. Everything was white. I only added color maybe 3-4 years ago.
Do you spray them?
I spray the colored ones, the clear I dip. But my front porch is a disaster zone. It's just got, I spray everything there, and I only wash it once in a while. So, what?
You do a single fire?
No, I bisque first,
Oh, this first.
and then spray and fire. And I often find that I have to glaze fire more than once. My Celadon definitely, but everything needs a little touch up. And if the, sometimes, for this kind of a shape, I have to turn it over, spray here, and then turn it over and do the rest of it, because you can't really get down under there that easily on a lot of shapes. So I find, okay, this will be darker, so then that needs to be made darker, but it's this fussiness that I do. And you can be much freer with this. You don't have to do it like this. But the idea of the tools and the carving and the layering is all you need to take away, and then adapt it and do what you want with it. So I think that's it. Is there
And to
questions?
think about it.
Yeah, think about
You
it.
have to think too.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Feels